Lady Jane Grey's story is a fascinating mix of Tudor politics, religious struggles, and the lasting impact of her tragic fate. Even though she was queen for just 9 days, her memory has stuck around for almost 500 years. This isn't just about history, it's woven into ghost stories, local legends, and strange happenings in the places she lived. Her tale, often referred to as the story of the 9 Days Queen, is one of dramatic shifts. It starts with her quiet life at Bradgate Park, moves through the intense political games at Syon House, and ends in the grim confines of the Tower of London, where she faced imprisonment and execution. Each step along her journey has left its mark, contributing to a rich tapestry of folklore that reflects how people feel about the unfairness of her execution at such a young age, only 16 or 17. In short, Lady Jane Grey's life and death continue to resonate deeply with us today, reminding us of the powerful stories that shape our cultural memory. The Tower of London stands as the primary site for sightings related to Lady Jane Grey. Given the fortress's long history as a place of imprisonment and death, it is often cited as the most haunted building in the United Kingdom. For Jane, the Tower was a place of rapid transformation. She arrived on July the 10th, 1553, as a queen, became a prisoner by July the 19th, and was executed on its grounds on February the 12th, 1554. This concentrated period of high emotional distress is frequently used by paranormal researchers to explain the frequency of sightings in this location. The most well-documented modern sighting occurred on the anniversary of her execution in 1957. 2 guardsmen on duty reported seeing a white shape or a phantom lady forming on the battlements. This figure was described as walking silently along the walls in the cold night air. What makes this account notable is that it was witnessed by 2 separate guards simultaneously, providing a rare level of corroboration for such an event. The sighting took place on February the 12th, the 403rd anniversary of her death, which reinforces the anniversary haunting pattern often associated with her ghost. The location of this sighting, the battlements, offers an insight into the narrative of her imprisonment. During her time as a prisoner, Jane was eventually granted the liberty of the Tower, which allowed her to walk in the Queen's Garden and on the hill. The image of a solitary figure pacing the high walls of the fortress fits with historical accounts of her confinement, where she was known to have watched the world from her windows, including the tragic sight of her husband's headless body being returned to the Tower on a cart. While many sightings are attributed directly to Jane, the Tower also hosts unknown entities that some believe are linked to her story. In 1957, the same year as the famous battlement sighting, a Welsh guardsman named Johns encountered a shapeless form with the face of a young woman at the Salt Tower. While this figure was not identified, the Salt Tower's proximity to the areas where Jane was held leads to frequent speculation. Some suggest that the faceless nature of these sightings represents a fragmented memory of the many women who suffered within these walls, including Jane, Anne Boleyn, and Catherine Howard. The Beauchamp Tower was the site where Jane's husband, Lord Guildford Dudley, and his brothers were imprisoned. This location is central to the auditory folklore of the Tower. Reports frequently mention the sound of a man weeping in the middle of the night, which is traditionally identified as Guildford Dudley. Unlike the dignified and stoic ghost of Jane, Guildford is portrayed as a figure of active grief, reflecting historical accounts that he was less composed in the face of death than his wife. Tower Green is perhaps the most sombre location within the fortress. It was here that a private scaffold was erected for Jane's execution, a privilege granted to her to avoid the crowds of Tower Hill. The execution was a grisly affair. Jane was blindfolded and famously struggled to find the block, crying out, "What shall I do? Where is the block?" before being guided to it by the Lieutenant of the Tower, Sir John Bridges. A famous story from 1864 tells of a rifleman found collapsed outside the King's house, which overlooks the execution site on Tower Green. He was court-martialed for neglecting his duty, but defended himself by claiming he had been approached by a white figure that he could not stop. He charged the figure with his bayonet, but the weapon passed straight through the apparition. His story was supported by 2 witnesses who watched from a window in the Bloody Tower. While the figure was not explicitly named, the location and the white shape description are consistent with the folklore surrounding the female martyrs of the tower, including Jane. Following her execution, Jane was buried in the Chapel Royal of St. Peter ad Vincula, which serves as the final resting place for many of the tower's famous prisoners. Her husband was buried beside her. The chapel is the site of several procession legends. While Anne Boleyn is the most famous leader of these spectral marches, sightings of a mournful girl near the altar area are often linked to Jane. Some visitors report a sudden drop in temperature or a sense of extreme sadness when standing near the spot where her remains lie. While the tower stories are defined by tragedy and death, the folklore of Bradgate Park in Leicestershire centres on mourning and local tradition. Bradgate was the Grey family seat and the place where Jane spent the first 10 years of her life. The connection between the land and the girl is expressed through several unique legends. One of the most enduring pieces of folklore in English history is the legend of the Bradgate Oaks. It is said that when news of Jane's execution reached her home in 1554, the estate's groundskeepers were so overcome with grief and anger that they beheaded the oak trees in the park. They pollarded the trees, lopping off the tops, to mirror the fate of their young mistress. These ancient trees, some of which are over 800 years old, still stand in the park today. Their distinctive, gnarled appearance, with squat trunks and heavy, low branches, is pointed to by locals as living proof of this 16th century act of defiance. While scientific pollarding was common for wood harvesting, the legend has turned these trees into a natural monument to Jane's life, creating a gloomy mood that fills the park. Bradgate Park is also home to a visual haunting involving a phantom coach and horses. Legend has it that every New Year's Eve, and sometimes Christmas Eve, a spectral carriage leaves the ruins of Bradgate House and travels toward the nearby All Saints Church in Newton Linford. The details of this sighting are particularly spooky. The coach is said to be pulled by 4 headless horses. Inside the carriage sits the ghost of Lady Jane Grey. In the most dramatic versions of the story, she is seen cradling her own head in her lap as the coach thunders through the lanes. The coach typically vanishes upon reaching the church or just before reaching the ruins of the old house. This headless coach motif is common in British folklore, but its attachment to Jane emphasises the communal memory of her violent end. Some reports also mention auditory phenomena associated with this haunting, such as the sound of galloping horses and the creaking of carriage wheels when no physical vehicle is present. Before her imprisonment in the Tower, the pivotal moments of Jane's reign occurred at Syon House in Hounslow and Chelsea Manor in London. These locations serve as the setting for the prologue of her tragedy, and as such, their folklore focuses on distress and the weight of unwanted destiny. Syon House was where the Duke of Northumberland and other council members officially told Jane that King Edward VI had named her his successor. Historical accounts describe Jane as being very distressed and falling to the ground in tears upon hearing the news. The Long Gallery, where this took place, is reported to have a heavy atmosphere. While sightings of Jane here are less frequent than in the Tower, visitors have reported seeing a pale, distressed girl in the gardens between the house and the River Thames. This is believed to be the spirit of Jane retracing the route she took from the river when she arrived at the house on July 9th, 1553, unaware of the burden about to be placed upon her. Jane was residing at Chelsea Manor just before being summoned to Syon House. She was reportedly ill during this time, likely due to the extreme stress of the succession crisis. While there are fewer ghost stories directly linked to Jane at Chelsea, the manor is famous for the spirits of other Tudor women, including Jane Seymour and Catherine Parr. The overlapping of these tragic royal lives in the same physical spaces has led some to describe these houses as junction points for Tudor ghosts. Sudeley Castle holds a unique place in the Lady Jane Grey story because it is one of the few locations where she is said to have been truly happy. She lived here as the ward of Thomas Seymour and Queen Catherine Parr. The folklore of Sudeley speaks of three queens who once walked the grounds together: Anne Boleyn, who visited in 1535, Catherine Parr, and Lady Jane Grey. Paranormal reports from Sudeley often mention a group of women seen laughing and walking in the Queen's garden. Catherine Parr is the castle's most famous resident spirit, often seen as a tall lady in a green dress accompanied by the scent of apple perfume. Jane's ghost is said to be united with her here. After the tragedy of their lives, Catherine dying in childbirth and Jane on the scaffold, the folklore suggests they have found a peaceful afterlife in the home where they shared a brief period of comfort. A common point of confusion in Sudeley's ghost stories is the spirit of Janet, or Jane, a 19th century Scottish housekeeper. She was a formidable woman who guarded the virtue of the housemaids by sitting at the top of the stairs each night with a feather duster. Many visitors who encounter this Jane believe they have seen Lady Jane Grey, but the Scottish housekeeper is a separate entity entirely. On February the 15th, 1554, just 3 days after Jane's execution, a spectacular celestial event was recorded in London. Chronicles state that many people noticed in the clear sky two suns with one huge iris. In modern terms, this was a halo caused by ice crystals in the air. At the time, however, it was viewed as a profound omen. Supporters of Queen Mary saw it as a sign of her dual authority, or a blessing on her reign after the defeat of the Wyatt Rebellion. Conversely, those who mourned Jane saw the two suns as a celestial reflection of the two queens who had struggled for the throne, or as nature itself grieving for the rising sun, Jane, that had been prematurely eclipsed. This event remains one of the few natural occurrences from the time that has been absorbed into the paranormal lore of her death. A darker piece of folklore involves a character known as Jane the Fool, a court jester who allegedly served at the Tudor court. In this modern folk narrative, the jester claims to have witnessed the true cause of King Edward VI's death: poison. More specifically, the story says that the jester visited Lady Jane in her cell at the Tower and brought her a sweet cake to eat just before her execution. The cake was allegedly poisoned to ease her pain and ensure she was enveloped by death just before the axe hit. While historians dismiss this as fiction, it highlights the persistent themes of poison and hidden betrayal that are a staple of Tudor-era spooky stories. Historical records are very clear about what Jane wore on the day she died. The Chronicle of Queen Jane, written by an eyewitness, states that she wore a black gown of cloth, turned down, the cape lined with fezzy velvet, and a French hood, all black. This all-black attire was a deliberate choice to show her humility and Protestant faith. However, almost every ghost sighting describes her as a white lady or wearing a shimmering white dress. This change can be traced back to the 19th century and the massive popularity of Paul Delaroche's 1833 painting, The Execution of Lady Jane Grey. Delaroche painted Jane in a radiant white satin petticoat to symbolize her innocence and purity as a martyr. The painting was so influential that it overrode the historical record in the public's mind. Consequently, when people see her ghost today, they see the version created by a French artist nearly 300 years after her death. Similarly, the work of Victorian author William Harrison Ainsworth helped shape the spooky reputation of the Tower. His 1840 novel, The Tower of London, turned Jane's story into a Gothic tragedy, filled with dark dungeons and ominous portents. This literary treatment encouraged the belief that the Tower was a place where spirits were trapped by the sheer weight of their past suffering, a concept that continues to draw ghost hunters to the site today. The ghost stories of Lady Jane Grey are more than just spooky tales. They are a method through which English culture has remembered and reinterpreted one of its most tragic figures. From the white phantom of the Tower battlements to the beheaded oaks of Bradgate Park, these stories provide a sense of experience to the dry facts of history.